Hello, my name is Harlan Cade. I was born in 1957 in Charleston, South Carolina. I am an ordinary man with a life that many would consider normal. I worked in real estate most of my life, raised a family, and always tried to be a good neighbor and member of the community. But something happened to me that completely changed my perspective on life and death. Since I was a child, I had some health problems. Nothing too serious at first, at least that's what I thought. I remember feeling my heart fail every now and then when I was little. It was a strange sensation, as if two raccoons were fighting inside my chest. At the time, I didn't think much of it. After all, I was a child full of energy, running and playing like any other. My mother always said it was just a phase, that I would get over it. And for a long time, I believed that. I continued my life normally. I graduated from college. I married my wife Miriam. We had our children. But that strange feeling in my chest never completely went away. It wasn't until I was 53 in 2010 that I realized something was really wrong. During a business meeting, I felt pain in my chest like never before. It was scary. I was rushed to the hospital where I was diagnosed with myocarditis. Dr. Lucas Bradley, my cardiologist, a serious and direct man, told me that my heart was not pumping blood properly. My ejection fraction was 39%, well below normal. This news came as a shock to me and my family. I have always been a man of faith. I attended church regularly, but I confess that this diagnosis shook my convictions. I started to wonder why this was happening to me. What had I done to deserve this? Over the next few years, my health was a roller coaster. There were moments when I felt better. I even thought I was cured. But the problems always came back. Between 2010 and 2019, I lived in constant uncertainty. My ejection fraction dropped to 25%. I tried to lead a normal life, but always with that shadow hanging over me. Miriam, my wife, has been my pillar throughout this time. She was by my side at every doctor appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear. I don't know what I would have done without her. And then in September 2019, everything changed. My health deteriorated rapidly. On the 13th, I was rushed to the hospital. I was weak, tired, feeling like my heart could stop at any moment. It was on that day that I had an experience that would change my life forever. An experience that took me beyond the limits of life and death, and made me question everything I believed I knew about our existence. That September 13th, 2019, I woke up feeling worse than ever. It was as if every beat of my heart was a Herculean effort. Miriam immediately realized that something was wrong. She looked me in the eye and said, "Harlan, let's go to the hospital now." I didn't argue. I knew it was serious. On the way to the hospital, things got confusing. I remember seeing the trees passing by outside the car window, hearing Miriam talking something on the phone, probably to our kids or Dr. Bradley. But everything seemed distant, as if I were observing the scene from outside my body. We arrived at the emergency room and I was immediately seen. Doctors and nurses ran around me, hooking me up to machines, injecting me with medication. Dr. Bradley arrived shortly after, his normally serious face now filled with concern. "Harlan," he said, "your heart is failing. We need to act quickly." Those were the last words I heard before everything went dark. Later, I learned that I went into a medically induced coma. Doctors explained to my family that my only chance of survival was the implantation of an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device, while I awaited a possible heart transplant. But while my body lay there, inert in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and people fighting to keep me alive, my consciousness, or soul if you prefer, began an incredible journey. Suddenly, I felt an indescribable lightness. It was as if all the weight of my sick body had disappeared. I opened my eyes, or at least that was the feeling I had, and found myself floating above my own hospital bed. I could clearly see my body down there, pale and still. I saw the doctors working frantically. I heard the sound of the machines, the beeps of the heart monitors. But the strangest thing was that he wasn't afraid. On the contrary, a deep peace enveloped me. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, I was free from all pain and worry. I looked to the side and saw Miriam, sitting in a chair next to my bed. She held my limp hand and cried silently. I wanted to comfort her, tell her that everything was okay, that I was there, but I couldn't. It was as if there was an invisible barrier between us. It was then that I noticed a light. At first, it was just a soft glow in the corner of my field of vision, but as I turned toward it, the light grew stronger, brighter. It wasn't an ordinary light, like that of hospital spotlights or the sun. It was a living, pulsating light, made up of millions of tiny glowing particles. I felt irresistibly attracted to that light. She emanated a warmth that was not physical, but spiritual. It was as if love itself was materialized in that light. And then, without knowing how or why, I began to move toward her. As I got closer, the hospital scene disappeared. The last thing I saw was Miriam's face, still crying next to my body. I wanted to go back to comfort her, but the pull of the light was too strong. And so, I left the world I knew behind and dove into the unknown. As I approached the light, I felt like I was going through a tunnel. The walls of this tunnel seemed to be made of a soft, glowing mist, which was constantly moving and changing. It was as if I were traveling through the very fabric of the universe. During this journey, I began to hear sounds. At first, they were just distant whispers, but they became clearer as I went along. I realized they were voices. Hundreds, maybe thousands of voices. Some I recognized vaguely, as if they belonged to people I knew a long time ago. Others were completely unfamiliar, but they all sounded welcoming and comforting. Time seemed to not exist in this place. I can't tell if this journey lasted seconds or eternities. All I know is that one moment I was in that tunnel of light, and the next I found myself in a place I can only describe as heavenly. Imagine the most beautiful place you have ever seen on earth. Now, multiply this beauty by 1,000. Maybe this way you can get an idea of where I was. The sky above me was such a deep, vibrant blue that it seemed almost unreal. There was no sun visible, but the entire room was bathed in a soft, welcoming light that seemed to come from all directions. At my feet stretched a field of flowers of colors I had never seen before. Each flower seemed to emit its own light, creating a multicolored carpet that stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was filled with a sweet, fresh scent, a mix of flowers, fruits, and something else that I couldn't identify, but that made me feel at home. In the distance, I saw what looked like a city. But it wasn't like any city I'd ever seen. The buildings seemed to be made of crystal and light, their towers rising majestically towards the sky. The streets were paved with what appeared to be pure gold, but not a cold metallic gold as we know it on Earth. This gold seemed alive, pulsing with an energy of its own. As I took in all this incredible sight, I realized I wasn't alone. All around me were other people, or were they souls? They had an ethereal, almost translucent appearance, but at the same time they were solid and real. They all seemed to radiate a soft light, as if they were lit from within. The most surprising thing was that all these people looked perfectly healthy and happy. There were no signs of illness, old age, or any kind of suffering. I saw children playing, adults talking animatedly, elderly people walking with the vitality of young people. It was then that I noticed something even more extraordinary. I looked different too. I looked at my hands and saw that they were emitting the same soft light as everyone else's. I no longer felt the weight of my sick body, nor the constant pain in my chest that had accompanied me for so many years. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely free and at peace. As I tried to process everything I was seeing and feeling, I heard a voice. It was a voice I had never heard before, but somehow it seemed familiar. It was a voice that emanated infinite love, compassion, and wisdom. The voice said, "Welcome, Harlan. There is much to show you." And so my journey beyond life truly began. Truly, while walking through that wonderful place, absorbing every detail, every sensation, something incredible happened. Suddenly I saw a familiar face approaching. My heart, or whatever I had in that state, jumped. It was my father, who had passed away more than 20 years ago. He didn't look like the frail elderly man I remembered from his final days. No, he was in the prime of his life, as strong and healthy as I remembered him from my childhood. His eyes shone with a light I had never seen before, full of love and wisdom. "Son," he said, opening his arms to hug me. The hug was indescribable. It was as if all the love we had shared in life was multiplied 1,000-fold. I felt a wave of warmth and comfort wash over me, as if every fear and worry I had ever had simply dissolved. Right after my father, I saw my mother approaching. She was also radiant, looking much younger than I remembered. His smile was so bright that it seemed to light up the entire room around him. She joined our embrace, and for a moment, I felt like a child again, safe in my parents' arms. But the surprises didn't stop there. I saw my grandparents, uncles, and aunts who had already left. Each of them seemed to be the best version of themselves, free from any illness or limitation they may have had in life. And then, I saw someone who made my heart skip a beat. My best friend, John, who had tragically died in a car accident in 2018. Seeing him there, healthy and happy, was one of the most moving moments of my experience. We ran to each other and hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. "John," I said, "you don't know how much I missed you." He smiled and replied, "I know, Harlan. I missed you too. But here, time is different. It feels like we saw each other yesterday, and at the same time, it feels like 1,000 years have passed." As we talked, I noticed something even more surprising. Next to John was a woman I didn't know, but who emanated a love for him so deep it was almost tangible. John noticed my curious look and smiled. "Harlan, this is Sarah. Well, I guess you could say she's my soulmate. We met here." I was amazed. John never married in his life. He always said he was waiting for the right person. Seeing that he had found this love here, in this place beyond life, filled me with indescribable joy. As we spent time together, although time seemed like a foreign concept in that place, I noticed that everyone there seemed to be in perfect harmony with each other. There were no conflicts, no misunderstandings, no resentments. It was as if everyone understood each other perfectly, as if they could see directly into each other's souls. As we talked, sharing memories and experiences, I noticed something curious. Some of the people I saw there were people who, in life, I knew had made serious mistakes. I saw a man who had been arrested for fraud, a woman who had struggled with drug addiction all her life. But here they seemed redeemed. There was no trial. There was no condemnation. Everyone was accepted and loved unconditionally. This made me reflect on the meaning of forgiveness and redemption. It seemed like in this place what mattered wasn't the mistakes we made, but the love we shared and the lessons we learned along the way. As I took all of this in, I felt a presence approaching. It was different from all the others I had encountered so far. It was a presence that emanated a love so pure and intense that it almost brought me to my knees. Instinctively, I knew who it was. It was time for my encounter with Jesus. The presence approached, and I felt my entire being vibrate with an energy that I cannot describe in earthly words. It was as if every atom of my being was responding to a primordial calling, something beyond human comprehension. And then, he was there. Jesus. It was not the image I had seen in paintings or films. It was something much more real. His appearance changed subtly as I looked at him, as if my mind couldn't completely capture his essence in a single form. But his eyes were constant. They were eyes that seemed to contain all the love in the universe, all the wisdom of eternity. When he spoke, it was not with words in the sense we know. It was more like his thoughts materialized directly into my consciousness, and the first thing I felt was an unconditional love so deep it made me cry. "Welcome, Harlan," he said, and in that moment I understood that he knew me completely. Every thought I ever had, every action I ever took, every doubt, every fear, every joy, everything was laid out before him. And yet the love he emanated did not diminish. On the contrary, it seemed to grow even more. I wanted to speak, I wanted to ask all the questions I had kept throughout my life, but I found myself at a loss for words, how to express the questions of the soul in human language. Jesus smiled, as if he understood my dilemma. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "Ask, Harlan. I'm here to listen and to show." Summoning all the courage I could, I asked the question that tormented me most. Why the suffering? Why do good people suffer so much, while those who seem to live without principles often escape unharmed? Jesus did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached out his hand and touched my forehead. At that moment, it was as if the entire universe opened up before me. I saw lives unfold. I saw the consequences of each action spreading like ripples on a lake, affecting not just the individual, but everyone around them and beyond. "Suffering," he explained gently, "is not a punishment, Harlan. It is a means of purification, of growth. Those who suffer most on earth are often those whose souls are ready for deeper, more spiritual lessons." I saw then how my own suffering, my struggle with heart disease, had made me more compassionate, more understanding of the suffering of others. I saw how I had come closer to God, seeking strength and comfort in faith. "But," I asked, still confused, "what about those who seem to escape suffering?" Jesus smiled again. "No one escapes, Harlan. Each soul has its own path, its own lessons to learn. What may seem like an easy life to human eyes can hide deep inner struggles. And those who seem to avoid the consequences of their actions in this life often face even greater challenges on their future journeys." I then realized that life and death were much more complex and interconnected than I had ever imagined. Every experience, every interaction, every moment of joy or pain was all part of a greater plan, a plan of eternal love and growth. Jesus continued, "Suffering is an opportunity, Harlan, an opportunity to grow closer to God and to others. It is through the challenges we face that our true nature is revealed and our souls are strengthened." As I absorbed these words, I felt a deep peace wash over me. It wasn't that the suffering suddenly made sense in human terms, but I began to glimpse a greater purpose behind it all. Jesus then looked me in the eyes and said, "There is more for you to see, Harlan. Are you ready to continue your journey?" I nodded, feeling both small in the face of the vastness of what I was about to experience, and infinitely loved and protected. With Jesus by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. With Jesus by my side, I began to float above that beautiful field where I had found my loved ones. As we climbed, the view expanded, revealing a breathtaking landscape. I saw a heavenly city that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was surrounded by walls that seemed to be made of pure gold, but not a cold, metallic gold like we know on Earth. This gold was alive, pulsating, emitting a soft and welcoming light. The city streets were like transparent crystal, reflecting and refracting light in a way that created an indescribable spectacle of colors. The buildings were of an architecture that defied human understanding. Some appeared to be made of solid light, others of materials that changed color and shape as you looked at them. Lush gardens dotted the city with flowers and trees of a beauty I had never seen before. Some flowers seemed to sing softly, their petals moving in a graceful dance. The trees had leaves that sparkled like precious jewels, and their fruits emanated an aroma that made me feel refreshed just by breathing. Rivers of crystal clear water cut through the landscape, their waters so pure that they seemed almost alive. Near one of these rivers I saw a group of people, souls I supposed, engaged in an activity that appeared to be a mixture of music and dance. The harmony they created was so beautiful that it made my heart, or whatever I had in that state, fill with indescribable joy. Jesus, sensing my fascination, explained, "This is just a small part of what we call heaven, Harlan. Here, each soul finds its fullest and truest expression." We continued our journey, and I saw places of learning where souls gathered to share knowledge and wisdom. I saw workshops where artists created works of transcendental beauty. I saw scientists, if I can use that term, exploring the mysteries of the universe in laboratories that seemed to merge technology and magic. What struck me most was the sense of purpose and joy that permeated everything. Each soul seemed to be exactly where it was supposed to be, doing exactly what most fulfilled it. "Here," Jesus explained, "there is no boredom, no feeling of uselessness. Each soul continues to grow, learn, create, and love for all eternity." We have seen groups of souls on relief missions preparing to help those still on Earth or in other spiritual realms. I watched in awe as they studied complex situations and devised subtle interventions to guide and comfort those who were struggling. In a touching moment, I saw a gathering of souls who seemed to be welcoming a newcomer. The scene was one of such pure and contagious joy that it reminded me of my own arrival and reunion with my loved ones. Jesus smiled, noticing my emotion. "Love, Harlan, is the essence of everything here. It's what connects us, what moves us, what gives meaning to all of existence." As I took all of this in, a question popped into my mind. "Jesus," I said, "this is all wonderful, but does everyone come here?" Jesus' smile became more serious. "Not all, Harlan. Every soul has its path, and not all paths lead immediately to this place. There are other realms, other experiences that some souls must go through before they are ready for this here." I nodded, feeling like there was more to learn about this, and as if reading my thoughts, and which was probably the case, Jesus said, "There is more for you to see, Harlan. Are you ready for the next part of your journey?" Although a part of me wanted to stay there forever, taking in all the beauty and love, I knew there was a purpose to this experience. So, with a mix of apprehension and curiosity, I replied, "Yes, I'm ready." And so, we prepare for the next stage of my journey beyond life. The scenery around me began to change dramatically. The bright, welcoming light of the sky faded, giving way to an oppressive darkness. The air, once light and fragrant, became heavy and suffocating. I felt a cold that penetrated to the core of my being. Jesus stood by my side, his presence an anchor of light and love amid the deepening darkness. "What you will see now, Harlan," he said in a voice full of compassion, "is difficult to witness, but it is important that you understand." We found ourselves in a place I can only describe as the opposite of anything I saw in the sky. It was a city, if I can use that term, made of shadows and despair. The buildings looked crooked and unstable, as if they could collapse at any moment. The streets were narrow and winding, full of dark alleys where echoes of wailing could be heard. The most disturbing thing was the souls that inhabited this place. Unlike the radiant souls I saw in heaven, these seemed opaque, almost transparent in some cases. Their faces were masks of anguish and confusion. Some wandered aimlessly, others seemed stuck in endless loops of repetitive actions. I saw a soul who seemed to be constantly counting piles of something that resembled money, only to have them disappear and reappear, starting the cycle all over again. Another soul was trapped in a room that looked like a distorted replica of an office, endlessly signing papers. "What is that?" I asked Jesus, my voice shaking. "This, Harlan, is what many would call hell," Jesus replied softly. "But it is not a place of eternal punishment as many on earth imagine. It is a state of being, a reflection of a soul's choices and actions." As we walked through that dark place, Jesus explained, "These souls are not being punished by an external judge. They are experiencing the consequences of their own actions and choices. The man you saw counting money? In life he was consumed by greed, placing wealth above everything, including love and compassion. Now he experiences the futility of this search. We passed through an area that seemed like an endless maze. Souls wandered through it, looking lost and confused. These, Jesus said, are souls who in life refuse to face the truth about themselves and their actions. Now they wander, seeking a way but unable to find it until they are ready to face the truth. What struck me most was the absence of guards or demons. There was no one forcing these souls to remain there. The prison they found themselves in was of their own creation. But will they stay here forever? I asked, feeling a deep compassion for those tormented souls. Jesus smiled gently. No, Harlan, this is not a permanent state. It is a learning process, a purification process. See? He pointed to a soul that seemed to be awakening from a long sleep. His eyes, previously opaque, began to gain a gleam of understanding. Around him, the darkness began to dissipate. When a soul is ready to face the truth, to learn the lessons it needs to learn, it begins its journey back to the light, Jesus explained. Some take what you would consider years, others what would seem centuries. But there is always hope. There is always a way back. As we watched, I saw beings of light, angels, perhaps, gently approaching souls that showed signs of awakening. They offered comfort and guidance, guiding souls out of that dark place. Divine love never abandons anyone, Harlan, Jesus said. Even here in what seems like the darkest place, the light of love is present, waiting patiently for every soul to be ready to receive it. This experience was deeply impactful. I realized that hell was not a place of eternal punishment, but a temporary state of learning and purification. It was a revelation that challenged much of what I had learned in life about the concept of hell. Jesus, sensing my deep reflection, said softly, "Come on, Harlan. There is more for you to see and understand." We left that dark place behind, and I felt relieved to see the light returning around us. We found ourselves in a space that seemed to be a huge amphitheater, with rows and rows of seats stretching out in all directions. In the center, there was a circular stage bathed in a soft, welcoming light. Jesus guided me to 2 seats in the front row. As we sat down, I noticed that the amphitheater began to fill with souls of all kinds, some bright and radiant like the ones I saw in the sky, others still a little dull, as if they were in the process of healing, after leaving what I now understood it to be hell. "What's going to happen here?" I asked, curious. Jesus smiled. "This, Harlan, is what we might call a cosmic lesson in love and forgiveness. Watch." On stage, a scene appeared that looked terribly familiar. It was a depiction of a car accident, the same accident that had taken the life of my best friend John in 2018. I saw John's car being hit by another vehicle, the driver of which was clearly drunk. My heart sank as I relived that painful scene. But then something incredible happened. I saw the souls of John and the drunk driver rise from their bodies. To my surprise, John immediately turned to the other man, not with anger or resentment, but with compassion. Did he forgive you?" I asked in disbelief. Jesus nodded. "Yes, Harlan. Here, free from earthly limitations, John could see the entire story of that man. He saw his struggle with alcoholism, the pain he carried, the circumstances that led him to that fatal moment. John understood that forgiveness was not just for the benefit of others, but for your own liberation." I watched in amazement as John embraced the man, both of them enveloped in a light of mutual understanding and love. It was a scene of reconciliation so profound and beautiful that it made me cry. The scene changed, and I saw other similar situations unfolding. Victims forgiving their attackers, enemies reconciling, families healing old wounds. In each case, love and forgiveness seemed to have incredible transformative power. "But how?" I asked Jesus. "How is it possible to forgive such terrible things?" Jesus turned to me, his eyes full of compassion. "Forgiveness, Harlan, is not about forgetting or excusing the harm that has been done. It is about releasing the weight of resentment and anger. It is understanding that each soul is on its own journey of learning and growth." He continued, "Here, Free from the limitations of time and space, souls can see the whole picture. They can understand the deep roots of each other's actions, the unhealed wounds, the fears and insecurities that lead people to do harmful choices. As we watched more scenes of forgiveness and reconciliation, I began to understand something profound about the nature of love and forgiveness. It was not something weak or passive, as we sometimes think on earth. It was a powerful and transformative force, capable of healing the deepest wounds and breaking the most destructive cycles. Unconditional love, Jesus explained, is the most powerful force in the universe. It is what sustains all creation, what connects us to each other and to God. Forgiveness is an expression of that love. Reflecting on my own life, I realized how many times I had held on to resentments, how many times I had judged others without truly understanding their internal struggles. This revelation left me feeling deeply humbled and a burning desire to be more compassionate and forgiving. But Jesus, I asked, how can we reach that level of forgiveness and love on earth where we don't have that full vision? Jesus smiled gently. It's a challenge, Harlan, but it's not impossible. It starts with understanding that every person you encounter is fighting their own battles, carrying their own burdens. It starts with making a conscious decision to respond with love, even when it's difficult. And remember, forgiveness isn't something you do just once. It's a daily practice, an ongoing commitment to love. As I absorbed these words, I felt a deep shift within me. It was like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying was being lifted. I realized I had a lot to learn about love and forgiveness, but I also felt a new determination to practice these lessons in my life. Jesus, sensing my inner transformation, said, "You are beginning to understand, Harlan, but there is more for you to experience before you return." With a mix of anticipation and apprehension, I prepared for the next part of my journey, knowing that each new revelation was transforming me profoundly. We left the amphitheater and found ourselves in a space that defied description. It was as if we were floating in the middle of a vast cosmos, with galaxies and stars swirling around us. But it wasn't just a visual spectacle. I could feel the pulsing energy of each star, the interconnectedness of the entire universe. Jesus extended his hand and, with a gesture, made something that looked like an immense cosmic tapestry appear before us. In it, I saw lines of light intertwining in complex and beautiful patterns. "What is that?" I asked, amazed. "This, Harlan, is a representation of the divine plan for creation," Jesus replied. "Each line of light represents a soul, and the points where the lines intersect are the moments of interaction and mutual influence." As I watched, Jesus pointed to a specific line. "This is you, Harlan." I saw my lifeline stretching through the tapestry, intersecting with countless others. Each intersection seemed to glow with a special intensity. "See how your life has touched so many others," Jesus said softly. "Every interaction, every kind word, every act of kindness created a ripple of influence that spread far beyond what you could imagine." I watched, fascinated, as my thread intertwined with those of my wife, my children, my friends, and even people I barely knew. I saw how a simple act of kindness I had done for a stranger years ago had triggered a series of positive events in that person's life. "But what about the difficult times?" I asked, noticing that there were spots on my line that looked darker. Jesus smiled with understanding. "These moments of challenge, Harlan, are often the most transformative. See?" He pointed to a particularly dark point in my line. The moment I received my diagnosis of heart problems, I saw how this experience had made me more compassionate, how it had brought me closer to my family, and how it had strengthened my faith. I saw how my struggle had inspired others to take better care of their health and value life more. "Every challenge, every suffering has a greater purpose," Jesus explained. "We can't always see that purpose when we're in the eye of the storm, but here, in this perspective, we can see how it all fits into the bigger plan." I continued watching my lifeline and noticed something curious. There were points where my line seemed to split, showing different possible paths. Those are the choices, Harlan, Jesus said, sensing my curiosity. Free will is a fundamental part of the plan. Every decision you make shapes not only your own path, but also influences the paths of those around you. I was amazed at the complexity and beauty of this divine plan. Every life, every choice, every interaction had a greater purpose and meaning. But what is the end goal of all this, I asked, feeling like we were getting to the heart of the matter. Jesus smiled, and his smile seemed to light up the entire cosmos around us. The ultimate purpose, Harlan, is love. All of this journey, all of this complexity, all of these interactions are opportunities for souls to learn to love more deeply, more unconditionally. He continued, every challenge we face, every relationship we cultivate, every choice we make is an opportunity to grow in love. It is through this process that we become more like God, who is the source of all love. As I absorbed this revelation, I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. Every moment of my life, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain, suddenly made sense in a way I never had before. So, my heart disease, I began, but Jesus finished my thought. It was an opportunity, Harlan, an opportunity for you to deepen your compassion, strengthen your faith, and inspire others with your courage and perseverance. And now, this near-death experience is another opportunity, a chance to bring back a message of hope and love for those who are still on the earthly journey. In that moment, I felt a deep peace and acceptance. I understood that every moment of my life had a purpose, that every challenge was an opportunity for growth, and that every interaction was a chance to spread love. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. It's almost time for you to return, Harlan, but first, there's one last thing you need to see. With a mix of anticipation and a twinge of reluctance to leave this place of deep understanding, I prepared myself for the final part of my journey. Jesus guided me to what seemed to be a portal of pulsing light. Through it, I could see images of my earthly life, my wife Miriam, my children, my friends, my work. It's time to go back, Harlan, Jesus said softly. I felt a wave of contradictory emotions wash over me. On the one hand, I longed to see my loved ones again, to hug Miriam and tell her how much I loved her. On the other hand, the idea of leaving this deep peace and understanding that I had experienced here caused me a certain sadness. Jesus, noticing my hesitation, smiled understandingly. Remember, Harlan, the journey does not end here. What you have experienced and learned is not the end, but a new beginning. He then showed me a vision of my future potential. I saw myself recovered, with a new heart beating strong in my chest. I found myself sharing my experience with others, bringing comfort and hope to people who were going through similar struggles. Your mission, Harlan, Jesus explained, is to bring a little of heaven back to earth. Share the love you experienced here. Practice the forgiveness you witnessed. Live each day with the awareness that every interaction, every choice, it has the potential to spread light and love. I understood then that my return was not just for me, but for all those whose lives I could touch with this new understanding. But, I hesitated. What if I forget? What if, by returning to the limitation of the physical body, I lose that clarity, that deep understanding? Jesus smiled gently. Some details may become hazy, Harlan. It's natural. The human brain was not designed to fully retain transcendental experiences like this. But the essence, the feeling of unconditional love, the understanding of greater purpose, that will stay with you, he continued. And in the moments when you feel doubt or fear, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and remember this light, this love. It will always be with you, always accessible in your heart. With those words, I felt a wave of courage and determination invade me. I was ready to return, to face any challenge that came my way, knowing that there was a greater purpose in everything. Jesus hugged me one last time, a hug that seemed to contain all the love in the universe. Go in peace, Harlan. Always remember, you are deeply loved, and you are never alone. With one last grateful look at Jesus, I took a step toward the portal. I felt myself being pulled back into my body, awareness of the spiritual world slowly fading away. I opened my eyes and found myself back in the hospital room. The sounds of the machines, the smell of antiseptic, the sight of Miriam sleeping in a chair next to my bed. It all felt at once familiar and strangely new. I felt a pain in my chest. The LVAD had been successfully implanted while I was out. But along with the physical pain, there was an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose. Miriam woke up and, seeing me conscious, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Harlan, oh thank God," she exclaimed, taking my hand. I looked at her and smiled, feeling a deeper love than I had ever felt. "It's okay, honey," I said softly. "I have so much to tell you." In the days and weeks that followed, my recovery surprised the medical team. Dr. Bradley marveled at my positive attitude and rapid improvement. "It's as if you found a new source of strength," he once commented during a consultation. I smiled, knowing he had no idea how true that statement was. As I regained my strength, I began sharing my experience with my family and close friends. At first, I was worried that they might think I was crazy, or that they wouldn't believe me. But to my surprise, most listened with a mixture of fascination and reverence. Miriam, in particular, was an attentive and understanding listener. She noticed the change in me, not just physical, but spiritual. "Your eyes look different, Harlan," she told me one day. "It's like you've seen something beyond." And she was right. I had seen beyond, and that vision had changed everything. As I grew stronger, I began to feel a calling to share my experience more broadly. I started visiting other patients in the hospital, especially those with heart disease. I shared with them not only my story of physical recovery, but also the lessons of love, forgiveness, and purpose that I had learned. I saw how my words brought comfort and hope. People who were on the verge of despair found a new reason to fight. Families torn apart by anger and resentment began to reconcile. It was as if, through me, a little of that heavenly light was touching these people's lives. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the physical pain was intense, when the reality of my heart condition seemed to crush that sense of peace I had brought with me. There were moments when I doubted, when I wondered if it had all been just a dream or a drug-induced hallucination. But in those moments I would close my eyes, take a deep breath, and remember. I remembered the unconditional love I had experienced, the vision of the greater purpose behind each life, and peace returned, along with the certainty that everything, even difficult moments, had a meaning. A year after my near-death experience, I was invited to share my story at a health and spirituality conference. I was nervous at first, but when I got on stage and looked out into the audience, I felt a calm wash over me. I began to speak, not just with my words, but with my heart. I told her about my journey, about the love I had experienced, about the lessons I had learned. I spoke about the purpose behind suffering, about the power of forgiveness, about the interconnectedness of all souls. When I finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then, slowly, people began to stand up, applauding with tears in their eyes. Many came up to talk to me afterwards, sharing their own stories of struggle and hope. I then realized that this was my new mission in life. It wasn't about creating a movement or becoming some kind of spiritual guru. It was simply about sharing love, spreading hope, and reminding people of their own inner light. Today, 5 years after my near-death experience, I continue on this mission. My physical heart still has its limitations, but my spiritual heart is stronger than ever. Every day is a new opportunity to spread a little more light, to practice unconditional love, to see the divine in every person I meet. I don't claim to have all the answers. I still have moments of doubt. I still make mistakes. I still struggle with my own human weaknesses. But now I know, deep in my soul, that there is a greater purpose behind it all. I know we are all part of a divine plan of love and growth. And to you, who is reading or listening to my story, I want to say, you are deeply loved. Your life has a purpose. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow, to love more deeply, to become more than you are now. Always remember, the light is within you. Love is within your reach. And no matter how dark the night may seem, dawn will always come. This is the lesson I brought with me on the other side. This is the truth I now live every day. And this is the message I hope to leave with the world, long after my heart finally stops beating, and I return to that wonderful light that awaits me. Until then, I will continue my journey here on earth, grateful for every moment, every breath, every opportunity to love and be loved. Because now I know this life is just the beginning. The best is yet to come.